right, we are here to do a walkthrough of practice test B for LT number 1, functions. Label that right there. Okay, so level 1 for LT1. We're trying to match the function families. We've got quadratic, linear, square root, absolute value. We've got to match them to equations and graphs. It's all about looking for clues, little pieces. All right, so what do we know? We can start like this. Quadratic, what do we know about quadratics? Quadratics mean it's squared. Where do you see a squared? I see one right there. So I know equation B is quadratic. The graph for a quadratic I know is a U shape. There's that U right there. So a U-shaped graph would be this graph right here. This is a U-shaped. All right, linear, I see that word line right there. Well, which graph do I see as a line? I see graph F right here. That's a straight line. Now, we also know later in the semester, linear, a line is mx plus b. Which one of these equations looks like mx plus b? I'm going to cross off the one we've already used right here. C, mx plus b. So equation C is linear. Square root, the symbol looks like that. Where do I see one of those? I see it right there with equation A. The graph kind of has a similar look, kind of that sideways arrow look. I see that right there, graph H. Process of elimination, I know what absolute value is, the equation. I know absolute value has the bars. I see those bars right there, so it's equation D. And the graph is a V shape, absolute value. So I look for the V shape, I see it right there, graph G. There is level 1. Let's look at level 2, graphing stories. So we're trying to draw a graph of a function described by this story. I left my house and slowly walked up a hill, which took 8 minutes. Then I ran down the other side, which only took 2 minutes. When I got to the bottom of the hill, I kept walking for 10 minutes at a normal pace. So looks like we're comparing time and distance. I'm going to make distance be my y-axis and time be my x-axis. Looks like time we're going to measure in minutes. So what happens? I left my house and slowly walked up a hill, which took 8 minutes. So let's walk slowly up a hill. So if we're walking slowly, are we covering a lot of distance or a little bit of distance? We're covering a little bit. So let's find 8 minutes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's cover a little bit of distance for 8 minutes. Then I ran down the other side, which only took 2 minutes. Now, if you're running, are you going to cover a lot of distance or a little bit? Running, you're going to cover a lot. Let's do that. So there's 2 minutes, 9, 10, and we ran a lot of distance. When I got to the bottom of the hill, I kept walking for 10 minutes at a normal pace, somewhere between this one and this one. This was slow walking, this was running. So another 10 minutes might be something like that. Okay, so there is our graphing story. Here's our slow walk, here's our run, and here's our normal walk. The steeper the line is, the faster the pace. Okay, now that's level 3. Let's look at level 4, domain and range. Domain and range. Domain is the possible x values of the function, of the equation. Domain is left and right. So what do we see here? We go from the furthest left to right. So the furthest left this function goes, there's an arrow on this side. That means it goes to negative infinity. I look to the right side, I see another arrow. That means it goes to positive infinity. So our domain is negative infinity to positive infinity. Another way to say that is all real numbers. Okay. Now the range is up and down. The range is up and down, the y values. So I start at the bottom. What's the lowest point this graph hits? And it's right here. It has a hard stopping point right there. That is the value of 2. Now, how high does this graph go? It keeps going, it keeps going. I see the arrow. That means it keeps going up forever. So our range, the lowest number is 2, and it goes to infinity. 2 to infinity. All right. So that's the domain and range of a graph. For an equation, this is a challenging one, okay? For domain, we have to think about what values of x work in a function. What values of x work in this square root? So in a square root, what must be true? These values in here must always be positive. We can't take the square root of a negative number. So what values of x are going to make this positive? Well, 2 times a positive number. Could x be 0? Yeah, because 2 times 0 is 0. The square root of 0 is 0. So our domain is when x is from 0 to, can we use all positive numbers? Yeah, infinity. 0 to infinity is our domain. We can use 0, it works, but if we put in any negative number, 2 times a negative number becomes a negative number. We can't take the square root of a negative number, so it won't work. The range, think about what comes out of a square root. A square root always outputs a positive number. No matter what you put in a square root, any positive number, you're always going to get a positive number back. So we know if it was just this part, square root of 2x, it would be from 0 to infinity. But we're going to take this positive number, and what are we going to do with it? We're going to subtract it by 1. So the lowest number we could get on a graph is negative 1. If it was just y equals the square root of x, the range would be 0 to infinity. But because we have to do minus 1, then it changes to minus 1. And the graph goes to infinity. Okay? We can get any number out of there, any big positive number. That's level 4. All right, our goal is to graph the function. Our goal is to graph the function. We are given inputs. We gotta do the work, find the output, find what y equals, then plot the point. Ultimately, we're trying to plot the point -2, comma, something. We have to find y by substituting in x. So we know y equals x squared minus 3. So instead of x, I'm going to take this value and replace it. So -2 squared minus 3. What is -2 squared? -2 times -2 is positive 4. Negative squared just means to multiply it by itself. 4 minus 3 is 1. So my first point is at -2, comma 1. X is -2, y is 1. Do it again. So y equals -1 squared minus 3. So -1 squared, -1 times -1 is positive 1. So y equals 1 minus 3 is -2. My x value I substituted in was -1. My y value I got out was -2. -1, -2 is right there. -1 on the x, -2 on the y. Substitute in a 0. 0 squared minus 3. 0 times 0 is 0. So y equals -3. Our point, x is 0, y is -3. 0, -3 is right there. Last one, y equals 1 squared minus 3. 1 squared, 1 times 1 is 1. 1 minus 3 is -2. So our answer here is 1, comma, -2. That means we plot a point right here. Now, if you think about it, this is a quadratic. What do we see in level 1? What shape should this graph be? It should be a U shape. Do we see a U shape here? And that's a good way we can check our work, is we see that U shape. So there's the first part. Let's look at the next one. First, what kind of graph is this? What symbol is this? That's a square root. We know our square root graph should look something like that. We're looking for that shape. So let's try it. Same idea as what we just did. We're going to take our equation, and we're going to take our x value, and we're going to substitute it in. So instead of x, I'm going to put -1. Now, what is the square root of -1? Remember what we did on the other side with domain and range. We can't take the square root of a negative number. This does not work. It does not exist. This will give you an error in your calculator. You cannot take the square root of a negative number. Number doesn't exist. We can't plot it. We cannot finish this. We just leave it. Cross it off. Leave it alone. On to the next one. Square root of 0 plus 2. What number is the square root of 0? What number times itself equals 0? Is 0. So y equals 2. 0 plus 2. Our point, x is 0. Y is 2. Next one. Y equals the square root of 1 plus 2. The square root of 1 is 1 because 1 times 1 equals 1. So y equals 3. Our point, x is 1, y is 3. And for this one, y equals the square root of 4 plus 2. Well, what's the square root of 4? What number times itself equals 4? That would be 2. 2 plus 2. So y equals 4. So our point is 4, comma 4. So if we go to plot that, 4, comma 4, Connect the dots, and there's that shape we wanted to see. All right, there is LT number 2, practice quiz 2. Good luck.